Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What We Seek. I'm doing my narrator voice, but today we're actually going to have a slightly different episode because I didn't prepare anything. We're going to do a continuation of what we discussed last week, which was the episode on trauma. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that we wanted to dive into, but we did not have enough time. So we've come back to the episode, and I think we've received a lot of feedback about our inability to stay on topic. I think it's obviously that we're both new to this. It's a very new experience for us. So we want to get better and listen to that feedback. So we're going to try to stay a lot more concise today about trauma. Everything we do is fueled by our desire to learn and grow because we believe that what we seek is also seeking us.
Yeah, and I also feel like trauma is such a deep topic to talk about because so many things can be traumatizing to so many different people, even if they don't realize it. So it's like good to like get in there. So maybe in our conversation, people can understand what they're traumatized about. Because remember how like you called me that night and I was like, oh, I don't think you're traumatized. And then I came here and I had like a Vietnam flashback of my own just because I felt rejected.
Yeah.
You remember? Because
Yeah.
we went after this podcast and we were talking in the car and she was like, why do you think you were shaking and stuff? And I was like, I don't think it's anything you said or did. It was just like your body language. And I felt like you shut me out because you didn't want to like talk about something. And then immediately I had Vietnam flashbacks and I started shaking and stuff. And then I did a little bit more research to just understand myself and like where that was coming from because it was important for me to heal it. And then I reread the book Trauma Keeps Score.
The Body Keeps Score.
The Body Keeps Score.
van der Kolk.
Bessel van der Kolk. And it's such a good book.
Yeah.
And then I was just like self-diagnosing, seeing where that is coming from. And one of the interesting facts that I found in the book that was describing exactly how I felt is that the doctor was talking about how in Darwin's research, he talks about how human beings can understand and pick up facial expressions, and that can also cause trauma flashbacks. So it doesn't have to be an event or an action. It can just be like somebody's facial expressions. And he gave this example of how we watch foreign movies. And in those movies, you can understand what the dynamic between the characters are, even without understanding their dialogue or what they're actually saying. So then I remember I had like a flashback because a lot of times in my childhood, it was a lot of like hush hush and don't speak about things. And I know that's such a small thing, but for me, I have flashbacks. Like whenever I want to say something, I look around to see if it's okay if I'm saying that. So it was a lot of like, I remember this like, again, like this is a funny thing to me. Last time I even went to my sister and I was like, I said something about how I was traumatized and Donna didn't laugh.
because it's not, to me, like when you said it, I was shocked. I was horrified.
Yeah, but then I said it to my sister, and because we were like trauma bonding, I guess, over it, we laughed at like something, you know, that we've both experienced. Because like there is nothing for us to do but to laugh at it because it was so painful, obviously, as a child. So I feel like laughter is like a defense mechanism. Okay, so this is what I wanted to tell you. See if you can relate to this, okay? So I grew up in a Middle Eastern household where a lot of my uncles with my father were in competition of who's better, okay? So we were not allowed to relay anything that went on in our households or any problems we had to them or anyone else because that would show that we are somehow not this perfect image of a family, right? And there was a lot of brothers in competition. So I remember one time we went to like a relative's home and I saw like a bowl of strawberries that they had. And I was just like eyeing it and I wanted to eat the strawberries so bad because like I'm a kid, right? And then they also had these like candies that were wrapped in like strawberry shapes. So I really wanted them. And then every time I would reach for the strawberries, my mom would give me this like eye look. She never said anything to me, but that eye look, it was just like so sharp and I could feel it. And this is something that he talks about, Dr. Van der Kolk talks about in his book, which is neurobiological mirroring, where you pick up emotions that are passed down to you. So a look can also be like registered as danger. So I knew immediately by reaching for the fruit, I was about to be scolded. And I remember I did reach, like I ignored my mom and I reached for the strawberries and I started having them. And I guess I was having them like dramatically and I was like, nom, 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 in front of in front at someone else's house. And then when we got home, for 3 days, my mom would buy buckets of strawberries and put them in front of me. And she was like, you're going to have these until they finish. So when we go to people's homes, you don't embarrass me because it looks like you've never had a strawberry before. And I don't like strawberries anymore, bro. I honestly don't. I can't stand them.
This I get. Not because my mom necessarily did it, but I know that this is such a common thing. Like, it's like you go to somewhere and then you're all of a sudden acting like you've never seen food before. They put it in your head that like all of a sudden now you're hungry. Why didn't you eat like 5 hours ago at home?
Yeah.
This is very common.
And we behaved better in like other people's homes than we did in our home.
Yeah.
Because like that was the thing. It's like put on a persona, put on a mask when you go outside, and when you come indoors, you can be who you are, which I dislike. And I remember telling you, I was like, have you noticed how like when we're in the house, we dress like homeless people?
Yeah.
And we wear like shirts that are like, there's like leakage on it, like
spaghetti
spilled stuff,
stains, ripped.
And then we use those t-shirts as like cloth cleaning tools. Do you do that in your house? We cut them up, but we use them as like cleaning cloths sometimes.
Literally, but we all do it. But I do it too. But the other day I saw my brother. I kid you not, he was at home. He's wearing a shirt that had a rip in it from like here to here. Like the shirt was destroyed.
But then when we go outside, like look at us. I even told you, I was like, I don't dress like when people see my social media, they think that I dress a certain way and I am a certain type of person when actually it's just like a facade.
Yeah.
It's like I dress my best when I'm about to be seen, and then behind closed doors, I don't look like this at all. And I was trying to mesh this life into the life that I live behind closed doors so that they can kind of meet in the middle, because there is just such a drastic change. And trauma can be as small as something like this.
Yeah.
Where like you care more about people's perception of you rather than actually putting in time to heal and be that person to yourself and family members. No?
That's very true.
Yeah.
And that is ultimately one of my biggest lived experiences. It's like you care more about the perception of others than your own perception of yourself.
And that's really not good. And I feel like Dr. Randall Kohl's book really helps with this, because even though the examples given in the book were like drastic, traumatizing events in people's lives that had to be studied for research purposes, I feel like when you understand what is going on in their life, you can apply it to your own, even though maybe you have experienced the same thing on a lower dosage. So, but like one of the things about his book that really surprised me is like the number of like people who are actually traumatized. Like the numbers are crazy. Like 1 in every 3 couples in America are a victim of domestic violence. 1 in every 5 children is molested, or they're abused in the sense that there's like a physical mark left on their body. And then when you think about it, that's America. Like when you come to the East, where that is very much normalized, like it's a method.
More common,
yeah. And then no one talks about it and because we're such closed and let's say, what do you call it? Like we're very like conservative. We close our households to be tested. Like I remember when I was growing up in Dubai, going to a therapist was taboo.
Yeah.
Because if you went to a therapist and you sought help, there was something really wrong with you and you were labeled to be a crazy person or somebody who wants to put shame to their household. Like your uncles would come at you and be like, you're going to therapist and you're telling our business to somebody who's not us. And it was just like, yeah, but I'm traumatized.
Yeah, it was like a stamp of you're not okay, and it's a very, very big taboo thing. And I think even in the world we live in now, even though we've like gotten so much more modernized, therapy is still not a commonplace thing. Like I remember the first time I told my mom I was going to therapy, she was like,
"Why?"
Yeah, it shocked her.
Yeah. I told my dad once that I had gluten allergy, and he was like, "Why? I had bread all my life and I was okay." I was like, "Yeah, but so what? I don't understand how that makes any sense."
Yeah. And what you were saying about, like, for example, 1 in 5 children being molested, I think, for example, for me, alhamdulillah, I'm very lucky. I feel like I grew up in such a sheltered household, and my mom was so overprotective. But actually, just last night, I was talking to Lexi about it, and she was saying, for her, it's more, she knows more people who have been sexually assaulted than people who haven't been. And that's here in the Middle East, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like that type of trauma as well, like is carried and it lives in your body forever. So it's, I don't know, it's like, and it's also, it can be things that are extremely traumatic like that, but it can also be small things. I think when we hear the word trauma, like, you know, we discussed last time, like people always think it's like something extremely big, but it can be something very small, even remembering, like you said, a facial expression. So it's, I don't know, it breaks my heart a little though. And I think like, even for me, when I hear people's stories and things, I think maybe when I was younger, I was more able to listen and to empathize without feeling like it's taking from my own life force, if you will. But now when I hear people tell me these stories, I feel like it breaks me a little bit.
Yeah, because that's another thing that they were talking about in this book, is that because you have empathy and you can put yourself in their shoes, so the experience still feels the same even if you have not experienced it yourself. So a lot of times when we hear about other people's trauma, it could have an effect on us because we are feeling what they would have in those moments.
Yeah.
So you can still feel things even if you haven't gone through them. And I feel like with the whole molestation thing, a lot of studies show how a lot of people who are molested as children actually adapted as a personality later on, like as characteristics to their personality. So you see this with a lot of like people who are homosexuals, and like studies show how a lot of them, I forgot the like the numbers, but there were a lot of like 1 out of 9 or something, like, or 9 out of 10 maybe, I forgot what it was exactly, but there was a 9 in there somewhere. And they were talking about how a lot of people who are, you know, homosexuals actually were molested as children, and then they adapted it as a personality trait because they thought that was what they were, and that they felt shame either for feeling sexually aroused when somebody from the same sex touched them, or they felt like that's how they should feel only with people who were from the same gender as them. And then this book also talks about children who were molested in their youth because they were traumatized, and now they feel immense shame, or they feel like in danger. Even if the touch is not sexual, their brain cannot register between whether it is a threat or not.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of a healthy brain, whether you can what was the part of the brain that was in charge of your sensory?
So your
Thalamus or hypothalamus?
your thalamus relays sensory information. But if you think about it, it's also because for people who have been through traumatic experiences, their stress response, their fear response stays really high. So their levels of threat detection is really high. And for people that went through traumatic experiences, for example, he actually discussed this in the book, but he was saying how your visual cortex, they saw a heightened activity in the visual cortex. So even if you're not in the same experience, even just hearing about it makes your visual cortex activate, and the areas of the brain associated with speech, which is Broca's area, go offline. So people that are traumatized aren't able to actually express their trauma or verbalize it in words because it's so heavy, and instead they keep reliving the experience in their mind.
The images are replaying in their mind, their frontal cortex. So it's like they're having their imagination is activating, but instead of it being like good imagination where they're planning things for their future, they go and refer to the past.
They relive the experience. Yeah, because again, we said this many times now, but trauma is fear frozen in time, because you keep reliving that experience because your brain didn't timestamp it correctly. So it sits everywhere. It doesn't sit in the past. It sits in the now and in the future. So every moment is clouded by that traumatic experience.
Wait, I want to read a quote for you from the book. It's the greatest source of our suffering are the lies we tell ourselves.
I wrote that down too.
Isn't that such a good quote? Because a lot of times, one of the things that happens with trauma, I did understand that we've repeated this many times, you live in the past instead of the present moment. But also a lot of times children shut down and live in the future instead. So one of the things that happened to me personally is that at the age of 12, when my parents were going through a divorce, I started daydreaming about a better day. And one of the things I still do in like moving cars, or like if I'm in a train station, is sit by the window, and it's my favorite thing ever to be able to replay things that have never happened. And I had to check myself for it because that's also a defense mechanism. And living anywhere in the present or the past is not a good place to be. You want to be here in the moment. So I had to work on this. And I feel like there was a section of the book where he was talking about rats and how when shown danger, rats would pick up their food resources and run back home, even if that home was not a safe place for them to be. And that happens with a lot of children who are traumatized. So for me, my safe place is daydreaming about future events that might not happen. And I have these a lot of like internal conversations with imaginary friends and people in my life that maybe took interest in me or they would appreciate me. And instead of finding real friends and a real society that I could belong to, I've become a lone wolf where I replay events or delusions of what like a better scenario would be. I literally go to like events and I come home and reenact what I would do in a situation where I was like accepted or like I could actually talk to people. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, so I think all of us did that to a certain extent. And I don't think I agree with you that like we do tend to live in our imaginations. I think it can be a very positive thing because it's not always a negative coping mechanism. But I think for you, where it becomes something that can be negative is because it's coupled with your attachment style, right? So if you think about the four different types of attachment style, and we talked about it, there's the anxious, there's the avoidant, and then there's the secure, and then there's a mixed attachment style. But for someone who has more of an avoidant and trying to become a secure, but just generally more of an avoidant attachment style, you can resolve into living in sort of these fantasies instead of actually being with real people because you're scared of developing that real connection, or other people can be very unpredictable to you. So you don't necessarily know what a healthy relationship dynamic looks like. So to you, then it's more safe to live inside your brain than to live in the reality of a world where you don't know how people will react.
How would it look like if you had your type of attachment style?
So for example, for me, because I have more of an anxious attachment style, it's that I ruminate on scenarios that are negative. So instead of thinking of a potential possible outcome that's positive, like let's say me and you were talking, okay, and everything's going well, and then you don't text me for 2 days and I'm trying to text you, my brain will automatically go to the worst case possible scenario and I'll be like, oh, something happened. She's mad at me. And I'll shuffle through all of these scenarios of potential things that I did that could have potentially upset you, all the things that I said that were wrong, all the other things that are outside of me that could have happened, to try to find a plausible solution as to why Yasmin is not talking about me. Not talking to me.
An extreme version of what we just talked about was showcased in a study where they were studying MRI scans of people's brain who were in this like long accident in Canada where like 76 cars crashed into one another, and there was a couple that were in the same car, and both of them had this like very intense situation where there was another car above them and there was a woman burning alive, and they had to witness all of those things while somebody broke in the glass and saved them. So the situation was really intense, and they were studying both of their brain chemistries and what had happened to them. With the MRI, it showed that one of them, the male, because he wanted to do something about it, his thalamus was showing dark spots where it was affecting his reptilian brain, where he wanted to constantly do something about things. So like I would think with your situation, what you were saying is it's very similar to his, but obviously an extreme version of what you're feeling, where he always wants to be on top of things or be in control or take back control. So he was like not acting right, or his sensory organs wouldn't let him sleep. He wouldn't be able to do like normal regular things because he was always high and alert.
Yeah.
Whereas the female had shut down the entire memory, and there was a huge dark spot in her thalamus where she had erased the memory of what had happened. And when they would ask her, she would say that I wasn't in the moment, like I completely shut out and I don't want to even think about it. So it was very hard for her. She felt nothing. A lot of times when we're in traumatizing situations, either we overact where like any single thing can set us off, or we numb ourselves. And I feel like a detached caretaker situation where you're what
Anxious attachment avoidant.
and
Yeah.
an avoidant attachment style like me, I would shut things down and like not want to engage at all, and instead live in my mind of what a healthy example of that interaction would be, instead of actually engaging in any physical.
Yeah.
So either you can like turn it up a notch where like you overreact to things, or you can like completely shut people out and like, I almost look like a cat, you know, like when cats like you do things in front of them, I just like look at you and I look judgmental, and it gives me a resting bee face,
Yeah.
where like I'm just like watching, but really I've shut down everything you've done or said because I don't want to even have to deal with it.
But you know, also because I think what happens with trauma a lot of the times is people dissociate as well, right? And so a lot of the experience you describe is dissociation. So people can either feel things extremely intensely in their body, or because they're not able to cope with those emotions, they completely shut them down, like you said. And so for a lot of people, instead of living in the now and the reality, they live in a very extreme fantasy world that is not real and it is constructed. And it is a part of dissociating where you're trying to protect yourself, that you create these different identities almost in different versions of yourself. And it's not as extreme as, for example, that for people that have dissociative identity disorder, where their personality literally splits. It can be more subtle where you have different personas almost that come on as defense mechanisms, or you just completely shut down.
Yeah. It's interesting how like you can either turn it up a notch or like turn it back down, but anything that's not in the middle where there's a balance is a problem, and it's showing how your brain is not registering or acting in a healthy manner. It's not functioning, right?
I think like if I want to underline it, it's like a healthy brain and a healthy body are able to maintain homeostasis. Wait, I'm going to repeat that. A healthy brain and a healthy body are able to maintain homeostasis. So you're able to have that equilibrium balance where your feelings and emotions can dip up and then they go back down and you're here. They can dip down and then you come back up. So it's this balance where you're constantly going up and down, but you maintain overall an arc of equilibrium. It's kind of like a straight line across a graph. What happens for people that have experienced extreme trauma is that it's very easy to go dip down really low, to stay in that low place, to then maybe also dip up really high, and to keep going and ping-ponging back and forth instead of having a steady, stable line across. And I don't think that's only trauma. I think like trauma to me is such a heavy word. When we say the word trauma, people think of very big things. But even your attachment style kind of underlines the things that you experienced in your childhood and the type of caregiver you had, that then in turn affects the way that you act and behave as an adult and the way that you're able to form bonds and relationships with other people. So every single thing in your life is shaped by not necessarily what you've experienced, but how you're able to respond to it.
I feel like that's why last episode it was very important for me. A lot of times when I want to get across what I mean, I do it aggressively, but it was important for me to say, no, I'm not traumatized. Trauma is a very big word. I don't like people using it. I don't like people self-diagnosing themselves because of this exactly. It can be an exaggerated version of something that we're thinking that a lot of people have experienced, and they have PTSD because of it. But also you can have it on lower dosages where you're still traumatized, and it has reshaped the way your brain chemistry and your brain has formed all together, shaping your character without having it be something that's extreme.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
So your personality could be shaped around the trauma that you've experienced, but it could be something as simple as don't have those strawberries.
Yeah.
Or don't touch that. I don't want you to be doing this. And looking around to always seek validation because your caretaker's way of disciplining you or teaching you right from wrong or giving you a moral compass was punishing, but without verbal or domestic abuse where it would bring it to an exaggerated trauma, but it was like on a lower degree. You know what I mean?
I think it's so interesting when you think about it, because every single thing we experience growing up then shapes us. And I mean, van der Kolk even discussed this in the book, how children, they don't, even if they go through extremely difficult experiences, they don't necessarily always come out on the other side traumatized. He was talking about a child in the book who...
9/11?
Yeah, the incident with 9/11. So that child, because he grew up in a safe and healthy home, and people were, and the people around him were showing him that actually this bad thing happened, but you're okay. We're all safe. We're all together. he didn't end up becoming traumatized. And so I think for a lot of people that carry trauma throughout their life, it's that they don't know how to regulate themselves because no one taught them how to regulate themselves. And when we say emotional regulation, what does that actually mean? And what does it mean for a child? For a child, it means that if I'm sitting there, I'm crying, I'm screaming, I'm having a tantrum, the worst thing ever has just happened. You have an adult there who's able to validate your emotions, to say that what you're feeling is okay, and to bring them back to safety. And bringing someone back to safety doesn't mean me just sitting here telling you, Yasmin, everything's going to be okay. It means that I'm actually very calm, I'm composed, I'm not panicking. And as a result, you're going to mirror my behavior. You talked about it earlier in the mind, we have mirror neurons. So someone, when they're calm and composed around us, we actually subconsciously pick up on that. For example, you're more of a calm person. So when I'm around you, my voice automatically lowers. I become more mellow. I'm not as loud as when I'm, for example, around some of my other friends who are more hyperactive or more loud. I become like, yeah, guys, let's go. Because subconsciously, I'm mirroring them behavior. And that we do that as social creatures. We want to be accepted by our peers. So we mirror their behaviors. But for a child, they're going to mirror you. They're a reflection of you. I had a friend of mine, she's a mom last night, and she was saying that. She said, your child is a reflection of you. And for me, for example, I had a mother, I always say this, she gave me so much love, the most amazing, loving mother, but my mom was a panicker. The smallest thing would happen, she would panic, right? I would go out, wouldn't answer her phone call. She would assume the worst. I remember one time I was out. This is me as an adult, by the way. I think I was like 24 at the time. I was out with my friend and my phone had shut off for like maybe an hour. By the time I charge my phone comes back on. I call my mom and my mom's like, I was just calling the police because you were not answering your phone. And that's an example of the extreme spiral she goes through when I'm not available or not
I
okay.
have a question. What are you more comfortable? What makes you more comfortable, if I laugh at that or not?
You could laugh at that. I think that is very like...
You see, that's the thing. A lot of times we trauma bond because it makes us feel safer when the other person reacts in the way that we want them.
Yeah.
So that it can help us like understand that was a funny thing and it's a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But really, the reason why you're mentioning it is because it did take a toll on you and it just felt like a burden because you are now mirroring a huge sensory thing that was coming from your mom, which was like a lot for you to like process.
Yeah. See, this is me as a grown adult, but now I realize I mimic my mom's behaviors. My anxious attachment is because my mom has an anxious attachment. And you actually said this the other day that I think for us, our parents, they didn't work on their attachment styles and their own issues. So as a result, they have passed it down onto us. And that is by no means a fault to them. They're doing the best with the limited resources they had. But it's our responsibility then to say, are we going to continue this?
Are we going to be chain breakers, cycle breakers or not? It really comes down to that. And that's why I really appreciate chain breakers and cycle breakers. And I keep mentioning it every episode. But I want to go back to that example because it's very interesting how we read the same thing and we process it differently. It's not really differently, but like I love that example of the book where he talks about, where Dr. Vandal Kalk talks about the child in 9/11 because he had experienced something that was very dramatic and he had seen people like fall, like jump out of the buildings. And then when the doctor had visited the child, he was 5 years old, he had painted a picture of the buildings and people jumping out of them. And underneath the building, there were these like dark circles that he had drawn. So the doctor asks them, what are those? And he's like, they're trampolines. So next time when people jump down them, they can jump back up and be safe. And it was very interesting to me because I realized the same thing, which is it's not that bad things that are happening to us which are causing the trauma. It's the fact that nobody's there to help us process and heal from them that causes the trauma. And this was something that was huge for me because the fact that this boy's family was so calm and collected and they helped him and they even allowed him to see a therapist at such a young age where like maybe it would be taboo for the, or maybe they would just like brush past it or in some cultures brush it under the carpet and never have to talk about it. And that's their way of dealing with trauma. I love the fact that they were there for him and therefore his imagination had allowed him to paint this picture that was saving everybody. As a result, he was becoming a hero, and his imagination was being used in a healthy manner. Whereas maybe a child who daydreams constantly and thinks about, replays the situation in their mind, either as nightmares that revisit the child, or if they're escaping it and constantly imagining people on trampolines around buildings, either one of those extremes again is unhealthy. So I love the fact that this boy had a support system is exactly what healed him.
Yeah.
And it's not bad things that cause the trauma, it's that we're left alone to deal with them on our own. And a lot of elder siblings have to deal with that, because if you look at family dynamics, a lot of times the elder siblings becomes the parent of the household. And because other family members, or like the people who are older, are not dealing with certain problems, it becomes the responsibility of the elder sibling to be the chain breaker, and that's a lot for the child to handle. And like for me, I feel like I was like 60 by the age of 12 already, because I was the person, and none of my siblings dealt with the trauma that I did, and they can't even relate to me on that level, because that burden wasn't laid on their shoulders. I had to do that, and I did such a fantastic job that for years they would come to me like as if it's me who should fix those things. And I had to kind of divorce my children and leave them behind, because I was like, I'm done, because I wasn't your birth, I didn't give birth to you guys.
Yeah, but you were protecting them. And I do think I agree with that a lot of the times. So I want to touch on a few of the things that you said throughout that, because I think all of that perfectly kind of underscores what the essence of what we're talking about is today, is that trauma is not just about what you've experienced. It's how your body learns to cope and regulate itself, right? So you can go through difficult experiences and come out on the other side, a safe and healthy, healed person, because it's not about what happened, but how you respond to it and who is there to help you get through it. So for people that are lucky enough to have a really safe family or safe environment where others are there to help them regulate, they don't come out on the other side scarred or damaged. But you brought up a really good point that I think is extremely common. You said that people sweep things under the rug. Now, if you keep sweeping things under a rug, eventually you're going to have this big giant pile and a rug that's trying to sit perfectly on top. And you're going to end up with a really, really messy situation. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for what most people do in their day-to-day lives, is that they shove things in. They feel things and then they numb themselves.
Can I tell you something? This is like not really relevant, but I want to talk about this. You know how I've told you the Quran has 70 layers of understanding it, okay? One of the things I've read in the Quran, and this is my interpretation, when you say sweeping things under the carpet, a lot of times when people want to disrespect the Arab or like the Arab community in general, they refer to them as the barrier of daughters. They used to bury their daughters alive because they didn't want them. I think that's a metaphor for burying or sweeping things under the carpet, or like burying people alive. Because I used to say this a lot. I'm like, they're burying me alive because the fact that I was speaking up about something. And as a woman, we're emotionally intelligent enough to pick up more. And we're very like emotionally in tune. We're very spiritual beings because we are the creators of life. So I think that verse in the Quran was like a metaphor for like, I use it as a metaphor of like people sweeping things under the carpet, because really what you're doing when somebody's speaking up or when they need help and like ignoring them is burying them alive, because they're still alive, they're just under rubble, they're just like clogged. It's like a veil, you know what I mean? And I feel like he talks about Dr. Van der Kolk talks about the fact that a lot of people think medicine does that, where it numbs the patient, where they just deal with it with medication, but really the underlying issue is much bigger. And that's why he talks about healing in taking the three Holy Spirits, the mind, body, and soul, and healing them all at once, where like it's not enough for you to have like physical changes where you just take medication and your mind adapts to things with medication. It's important to engage all three things at once in order to fully heal.
Yeah. I think with medication is a tool. It is not the solution. You don't want to treat the symptoms, you want to treat the cause. And all that medication does is that it treats your symptoms. It makes you feel better while you're on it, but you're not treating the root cause of the issue, which is the underlying things that you've experienced. And I think I will never dismiss the importance of medication. It is a very big tool to help people. A lot of people need it, but it should not be the only tool that's being utilized. Otherwise, you're just numbing yourself. You're not actually fixing anything inside of you. And I think it's really disheartening because even the book that we're reading, it was written, I think maybe 2008, or the research he was showing is older research because it is an older book. It's still an incredible book. But if you research statistics on the amount of people that use medication and abuse medication in our day and age, and the levels of anxiety and depression that we have in our day and age, it's
medication has become their escape, and that is not a good thing. Medication needs to be help you heal, not for you to escape the situation, but for you to actually deal with it.
Yeah. And I think even for me, for example, I'm someone that I never thought, like when I was growing up, I never thought of myself as someone that has ADHD. And the older I've gotten, I do feel like I have a lot of symptoms. And because it's gotten to a point where sometimes it's so difficult for me to get things done, I'd be like, oh, I just want medication. But that's me choosing a cop-out road instead of me actually, I don't even have, keeping in mind, I'm saying this because I don't even have a formal diagnosis. I'm diagnosing myself and I'm almost using that as an excuse so that I don't work on myself.
Yeah, mine is shopping.
Yeah.
But one of the things with medication is I have this like conspiracy theory, and I'm totally against medication with my own reasoning. But one thing that I love is new herbology that helps you deal with those things. So like growing up, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and my mother never allowed me to take medication for it. And she was like, I don't want her to deal with it this way. So I had to learn to focus on things and find things that I loved, which was really helpful to me. So I started drawing and painting and doing and expressing myself artistically, and that helped me heal. And I still use it as a hobby and an outsource of weight, like because I just feel so much, and my sensory organs receive so much that it's very helpful for me to like my output to be something that's artistic. So I use it as a defense mechanism, kind of. But I love it because it's like a healthy way of me dealing with things. And it also helps me focus on things. But one thing I love is herbology and like medication that's new now. So like I was researching into like magnesium that's for your neurobiological magnesium for your neurons. And then there is like lion's mane and like different like mushrooms that are coming out. And I love watching Andrew Huberman's podcast where he talks about different medications and stuff. Anytime he says something that's like man-made, I tune out. But when he introduces a new drug that has been tested and the results have been really good and it's just like natural, I love, like exploring and seeing what that would do for me.
100%. I think supplements is a really big one. And also your gut health. So people don't realize this, but your mental health is deeply linked to the health of your gut, because your vagus nerve is connected to your brain. So it runs all the way from your gut to your brain. And actually most of the serotonin in your body is produced by your gut. So if you're not eating the right things, you're automatically putting yourself at a disadvantage. And I'm into that as well. I recently, like, instead of taking medication or doing any of that, I started researching what what supplements can help me focus. I started taking lion's mane, L-theanine, magnesium. What else was there? There's so many more that I was taking for a while, but all of these things really help you improve your cognitive functioning.
When psychologists want to help you heal with your traumas, one of the things that they do is that they heal the brain from bottom up.
Yeah.
So they deal with your reptilian brain, and then as a result of healing your reptilian brain, which is, if we were to describe what a reptilian brain is, it's responsible for your survival, your fight and flight, but also think of your reptilian brain as everything a newborn baby can do is related to a reptilian brain. So your metabolism, the fact that you are breathing and your lungs are working, all of those like autopilot motor systems in your body are connected to your reptilian brain. As a result of other parts of your brain, so the top parts, your thalamus, your hypothalamus, your frontal cortex, all of these frontal parts or like top parts, when they are damaged, it causes the roots or like the reptilian brain at the bottom to be affected. So you might lose sleep, you can't function the same, you're stuck in the past, you don't have a healthy metabolism, you might be an overeater, a binge eater, you might be an angry person, you might go in fight and flight all the time. So the top of the tree branches, when the leaves are dry, the roots start to get damaged. So the way that doctors heal a person is by dealing with the roots first and watering those roots. So you want to be in a safe environment. You want to be around people that you love, that take care of you, that give you a sense of safety and community. And then eventually you start healing the leaves, because when the roots are healed, the leaves just like flourish, right? So then engaging the mind and body and your soul, you can start doing things like yoga, going out for walks, staying in the moment, practicing meditations where they help you stay in the moment. So I love that example. And he was like, a lot of people, the book talks about how a lot of people, this is a very good book, you should read
incredible.
it. It's a little bit heavy, and people talk about, I just overall really enjoyed the book. It was very insightful for me. And one of the things that I loved was that he was like, people with trauma either heal or deal with things top to bottom or bottom to top. So either they're put in safe environments where they start handling things better from that point on, or because they have practiced being in the moments, they're more spiritual people, their mind knows how to handle things and stay in the moments, they self-regulate their own systems. So I remember you calling and you telling me, I was like, I'm not traumatized because I know how to self-regulate. My self-regulation comes from a place of me being so mentally mature and like mentally stable. And I feel like because of the meditation and my spiritual journey, I regulate myself from top to bottom. But then you tell me that I still have lack, that my roots don't feel safe, right? And it's because they are not safe. And I'm looking for my mind to find a way so that I can grasp at that safety somehow, because I do feel a lot of turbulence when it comes to my physical life. And with you, it's like the opposite. So you're very safe and you self-regulate by reminding yourself. I feel like for you, it's both. Like you sometimes it's up, down, and sometimes it's down both. So I love that. And that was such a good example for me to visualize something and keep it with me, because that was like, I love that. And I feel like spiritually, like with Sufism, the same thing happens. The Islamic mysticism or Islamic scholars talked about this in the golden age of Islam. I saw this thing. There was a guy talking about how this one thing was mentioned by so many people. First, Buddha mentioned it 1,000-something years ago. The Quran mentioned it 1,400 years ago. Rumi mentioned it 800 years ago. And Carl Jung mentioned it recently in psychology, that anything inside of you, any trauma, any dark ink spots in your glass of water that does not dissolve within you, that does not become a part of yourself, and it's not dealt with, will reappear in your life as different forms of manifestation. So if you have not dealt with a trauma of a parent, a caretaker that was dismissive, that was abusive, that person or that thing inside of you that's not healed will reappear over and over in your life until you have dealt with it. Because you are the creator of the world around you, and you'll keep manifesting it, right? So I love the fact that this example gave me a way of dealing with that. And actually, when you look into spirituality and the chakras, when you want to deal with your higher chakras and healing them, first you have to start with the root chakra. The same thing goes for Sufism and Islamic mysticism. They talk about healing the nafs al-ammara first before you can get to the higher levels of the nafs or the soul. And it's very interesting how, your friend was talking about this book. What was that book you told me? Heal Your Body. And she was like, there was a woman who was talking about different traumas and what diseases they would cause, and she would use it as an
encyclopedia. It is actually, the book is a full encyclopedia of, like, let's say you have back pain, what trauma it's then linked to.
Exactly.
Or if you have a stomach ache, what is causing it.
So she was using it and she was like, oh, if you have back pain, it means you dealt with a father that was like this. And if you have like head pain, it's because of this, so and so. And in Sufism, we have a lot of books like that where they talk about blockages in certain nafses or certain chakras and what that blockage would cause for you to feel and the trauma you would experience or the disease that you would have. There's so many books on jinn and the diseases they cause, or like trauma and like the diseases they cause, but also in our Eastern medicine, right? So Chinese or Indian people or Islamic philosophers have talked about this thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
It's just because now we are taught science in schools and we understand H2O or like the basics of things. When scientists show us evidence and like research, we believe it more, and we've become people who want evidence to things, and we just don't want to be told things. We want to understand them with our own understanding. But I love mixing Western and Eastern knowledge together and use it on myself. So I love that example of trees. You can see that example given by like Buddha and like people, you know.
It's because it's all deeply connected. So like what you described a little bit earlier, if you think about it from a psychological perspective, is a biochemical feedback loop. Your thoughts create your actions, create your feelings, feelings create thoughts that create actions, and they're all deeply interlinked. Like nothing in the body or the brain happens in isolation. So every single part of us is connected. And whether people want to acknowledge spirituality and our old Eastern teachings, whether you acknowledge it or not, it does not take away from the fact that there's truth in it, right? So there is scientific ways of explaining things. And this is what I love most about like our podcast. I feel like a lot of the times I come with like the scientific receipts, and then you come and you bring the spiritual side of it, because they're all rooted in the same things, right? Which is, how can you better yourself as a person by looking at the things you've experienced and the ways that you can grow and heal from them? And I feel like you said so much that like I don't know what to touch on, but like it was all really well said, and I completely agree with it.
I feel like you know how like I feel like we can maybe talk about like energetical vampires. So I don't know if people can understand me, but the way that your body, so I love that he talks about this. So even psychologists, when they want to heal a patient, they deal with mind, body, and soul. So your mind needs certain neurotransmitters to be able to function properly. So you might take medication to fake the same thing, or you might take what do you call it? Vitamins? Supplements. I can't believe I forgot the word supplements. This is what the podcast does to you.
No, but or you might eat certain foods. Like it's all
with spiritually healing, I love spiritually healing, and I love like healing from top to bottom, because and actually it's not true, because with spiritual healing it's from like the bottom to the top as well. So a lot of like Islamic scholars talk about how, you know how there's like 144,000 chakras, there is 114 surahs of the Quran, and when you read with the Quran, when you read it from top to bottom, it heals all of your chakras. And actually, you know how they say Surah Yasin is the heart of the Quran, it deals with the heart chakra, it deals with the nafs al-qalbi. The only difference is that in Hinduism or in India, it's called chakras, but we call them nafses. We have 7 nafses, and Sufis talk about this, where all 7 nafses have to work together and heal. So one of the things that I explained to you, like behind closed doors, just between the two of us, I'm going to explain this again and see if you can get it. And I hope people can watch it, because I do have a fear of like being judged about talking about things that are considered taboo, because a lot of times as soon as people hear spiritual things or anything that's like spiritual, they might like call it pseudoscience. But I hope that like people who are, I don't know, I hope they understand what I'm trying to say, because like I feel like Muslims would, because there's a lot of this in, it's just because I don't look like I'm Islamic, it makes it seem like I shouldn't have an opinion on anything Islam, but I think that the Quran was put there so that we can all have our own interpretation of the book. So this is what do you want to say?
I want to just cut you off before you continue saying it, because I want to say something that like you have been someone. So I grew up in a very religious household. I always say this. I grew up praying, and I grew up with a close connection to God. But you're someone that like in the past like year and a half, I would say, you've helped me deepen my connection to God so much. And I really like appreciate like every single thing you have said and you've done for me, like to a point where like it almost makes me want to cry, because I feel like there were times this year I'm gonna cry. I knew I was gonna cry today, but I feel like there were the times this year where I feel like my faith was so deeply shaken by things, and you reminded me so deeply of how important it is to maintain my connection to God, and I like really deeply thank you for that, because I feel like that was something I lost touch of. So I don't think it's fair for anyone to ever judge someone based on the way that they look, because it has no reflection of the spiritual depth that you have or what's actually in your heart and your connection to God. So that's like a really big misconception, and I want to hear this.
I want to give you a hug.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I feel like I made you cry.
No, it's okay.
I
want
love
tissue?
Yes, please.
You know, I always say this. I say, in order to understand God, you must transcend religion. Religion is, in Sufism, there's 4 levels to Sufism. The first is the Sharia. The Sharia gives you a good discipline, and it regulates your entire system based off of the physical attributes or the physical things that you're doing. But that's only level 1. You must transcend religion, and a lot of religious values are actually cultural and traditions that are passed down alongside religion. They're not actually what the book itself or what the religion originally represented. It's just people's like cultural or their perspective of what the Quran should be shoved down the next generation. So I feel like even with my religious perspective, I am a chain breaker because I do have a strong relationship with God. Stronger than anything I've ever seen. Like I've met a lot of people. I've even met a lot of scholars, and I feel like your belief system, your heart, like has nothing to do with like, I don't know, the strength or your connection with God. It's like a self relationship. It's like how I said in Farsi, the word for self is khod and the word for God is khoda. It's just like God is within you. So how well your relationship is with yourself, your relationship is determined with God, right? So I feel like with me, it's like a lot of times, even my healing journey and looking into psychology is because I want to heal the self so that all parts of me that are not in resonance with God can dissipate. Because I know a lot of the things I felt in my childhood, a lot of the traumas were again passed down to me. Because when I was born, I don't remember having a fear of strawberries. Now suddenly I have developed them. I don't remember somebody calling me and putting me in a panic mode. I was just fear. And I want to go back to the version of myself as a child where I was so in tune with God that everything was possible. And now because of people's belief systems and the traditions or the traumas that were passed down to me by unhealed people, I have stuck in this mindset in a box, and now that has separated me from my God because I was the peak of creation. Somehow now I'm scared of strawberries. It's like an elephant being scared of mice. How did I become this person that, like, with you looking down, I went into a shaking mode? Like, who have I become that I'm like afraid you aren't going to attack me? Why can't my brain differentiate between a safe environment and a non-safe environment? One of the things I want to talk about, the spiritual thing on another podcast, but one of the things I want to talk about is like the mirroring, the neurological mirroring. A lot of people, one of the reasons I say it's not good to trauma bond, it's good when you are like an alcoholic and you go to AA meetings to know that you have a community that you can talk to. What happens a lot of times is that people start bonding over traumas and they stay in those circles, never overpassing them, never growing out of that situation. So what you end up doing is like trauma bonding and constantly only getting attached or growing relationship with people who have that trauma. It's good to heal and know that you're safe and then move past it. Because when you go into a room and like, you know how you go into a room, a lot of times I see comments under like stand-up comedians videos and they're like, what are they actually laughing at? It's not even that funny. But in the room, in the moment, because everybody's so joyful and happy, neurobiologically, you're mirroring their energy. So you are also vivacious and laughing and enjoying yourself, right? So it's important to put yourself in situations where the people you're surrounded by embody the energy and the feeling that you want to encapsulate within your vessel. If I am constantly referring back to people who are swearing at each other, if they're always fighting, if they're bonding mechanism or their bonding techniques are over traumatic experiences of their life, I will become the version of myself that I suffered as a child being around. So I want to outgrow that, right? So I feel like it's very important to find friends that are similar minded. And one of the things with me is that if I notice anything inside of you that's causing me to have flashbacks, and you're kind of like, I can feel your energy affecting me to the point where like I am becoming the old version of myself, I detach very quickly. So I monitor who I want to be surrounded by. And if I find a singular thing that's like causing me to have flashbacks of my trauma, or it's reminding myself of a person that I don't want to be, I run away from. For example, one of my biggest things right now is that I want to be aware of my throat nafs, okay? So I've noticed that one of the things I do now is like if I'm like scrolling on Instagram and I see somebody swearing, I immediately move past it because I don't want to be cussing anymore. I don't want to use profanity. I want to engage with people who have a wide range of vocabulary so that my way of speech can become better and hopefully my kids can learn from me. Yeah. I don't want to express myself in ways that are toxic, and I want to completely erase it out of my mind. So if I see you having like what we would call a ratchet behavior where you're doing things, when you're saying things that are provocative, if you're even bonding over, you know how like sometimes I watch like videos like makeup tutorials of Michaela, and when she says the F word, it's so interesting to watch. You're like, I love the way she says the F word. I don't want to relate to that anymore. So I skip.
Yeah. Repetition is recognition. What you consume, you become. So if that's what you're consuming, you're ultimately going to become that because you internalize it. And I think the interesting thing is, this is a thought that I had yesterday. You don't just attract your trauma, you're attracted to your trauma. So for a lot of people, they will put themselves in situations with the exact thing that they're trying to heal from, and it happens unconsciously.
Because it's familiarity. You go back to what you're familiar with because that pattern of behavior makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
And you know, I see a lot of people, you were telling me how on the podcast we should talk about dating, and people would really love that. But honestly, I feel like one of the things I've noticed in a lot of like podcasts with like people like giving dating advice and stuff, a lot of women complain about the fact that men are not mature enough, or they're players, or they're cheating and stuff. When you read this book, The Body Keeps Score, you realize that you behaving in certain characteristics or behaviors is because your brain has not fully functioned. So as a woman, seeing that version of yourself, I really don't want to disrespect anybody, but I understand why women nag about it. I don't agree with the way that they're putting the other gender down so much, and they're kind of like bashing them for the way that they're acting. I don't want to do that to men, and I don't want to like make them feel small that way. But really, truly, when you read this book and when you start becoming aware and studying about yourself more and knowing your thyself better, you realize that all of those things that we're complaining about are actually immature or like undeveloped brain. You know, like for example, have you seen like elder men who like, if you notice, like elder men don't like to hang out with younger guys because it reminds them of the version they used to be, and they think it's immaturity, but it's actually underdeveloped brain that you don't want to associate with. Yeah. So a lot of times like men are like sitting on podcasts and they're like talking about stuff, and women are like, why are you guys doing this and blah, blah, blah. And they kind of nitpick at what those people are saying, but it's actually because we are noticing subconsciously that brain is not a healthy, developed brain.
Yeah.
And we notice that in people's like facial structures, we notice it in their behavior, but really it's like biology. We're not attracted to people who are players, not because like being a player, maybe it has repercussions and people don't like it, but it's really the core of it is because we don't want to be around people who are underdeveloped, because we know that underdeveloped brain can keep reenacting situations that can be harmful for us.
Yeah.
So our reptilian brain is like, stay away from that red flag because of 1, 2, 3, right?
But I also think it's really interesting because it's very easy to put your how can I say this right? It's very easy to blame the other person.
Yeah.
And not to take accountability for yourself, and not to see the places where you're still unhealed and you're attracting the things where you have not yet healed from. So my friend Lexi, who's here today, she always says to me, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you accept. So if I'm operating from a place where I'm still unhealed and I'm still deeply linked in my trauma, I'm going to accept things from people that is so much less than what I actually deserve. I'm going to allow myself to be treated in a certain way. And I'm saying this with all the grace in the world because it's something I'm extremely guilty of and I'm actively trying to break out of. I'm actively trying to break out of patterns where I accept less than what I deserve in relationships. And that doesn't mean it has to be rude or it has to be dramatic. It just means that, like you said, when something is not serving you, you take a step back.
Yeah.
That's it.
I understand both sides because it's like I just understand both sides. I would love to
I
talk
get
about
both
it,
sides.
but
Yeah,
I
we're
don't
running
want
out
to
of-
blame either side. And I
No.
also don't like this culture where we talk so meanly about one another.
No, it's not. That's the thing. I don't, and I also really like when I hear like women say things like all men are cheaters
Yeah, I don't
or
believe
men
that.
say things like all women are gold diggers. Like all of that is extremely toxic behavior, and people are saying those things because of their trauma.
Yeah, I don't want to say those things to men, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's so disrespectful. And my number one thing is like respect, and like love is rooted in respect and trust.
100%.
And you have to trust and believe that there are people who are trying to heal, but you have to give them grace because those men were once young boys who are also traumatized. And so I understand from a person who wants to like break cycles, I understand how difficult it is. The number one thing is that it's very important for us to educate ourselves so that we don't repeat patterns. So I understand what that guy is going through. That like being a player is like his defense mechanism to some things that maybe happened to him. Maybe he felt rejection, or as a
Yeah.
child his caretakers weren't taking care of him. So now he really wants the attention of too many people. So all of these things are that really in essence, but the way that people like take it to social media to like insult one another and stuff is
wrong.
just like a culture I don't want to relate to.
I don't think we should excuse people's behaviors either, but we shouldn't, talk down on them because of it. I think it's like we should learn that, okay, this is wrong, but what you're doing is not right either, and kind of find a middle ground. It's all about equilibrium.
I think our time is over.
Yeah. So I think
it?
we can I think this is like a really good place.
I keep putting my hair around me because I'm freezing.
I know it's so cold, and I think it's a really good place for us to wrap up. So thank you all for listening us today on our episode about trauma. As always, we would like to end the episode with a question. What are some of the ways, I'm thinking of this on spot. Do you want to help me think? Do you have a question?
Maybe it could be an internal, like private conversation you have with yourself, but really, what was it that caused you trauma? Was it a big event? Was it a smaller one? Did you take the time to heal it? Have you recognized it? And if not, we would really recommend for you guys to read this book because it's a very good book, and just doing research on the matter because all of us are traumatized in some sense of the degree because of the world we live in. So it's important to educate ourselves and become the chain breakers that we aspire to be.
Yes. And as always, it's not about having the perfect answer, but reaching, wondering, and remembering that what we seek is also seeking us. Thank you guys.
Bye.